Imagine a secret so profound, so devastating to our current worldview, that the entire global system of history and education had to be constructed just to hide it. This isn't about some forgotten king or a misplaced battle. This is about the bedrock of human existence. What if I told you that the official timeline we were all taught in school is not just flawed, but completely fabricated? And what if the undeniable proof of this massive lie is not hidden in ancient texts or dusty archaeological digs, but in something far simpler, far more ruthless, and infinitely more honest: basic mathematics? Don't go anywhere, because today we are going to use arithmetic to utterly dismantle the official narrative of the past, starting with one of the most magnificent lies ever told: the construction of the great cathedrals of Europe. Our investigation begins in Reims, France. Stand before the Reims Cathedral and your sense of scale is broken. Its stone vaults soar toward a god who seems to demand impossibly high ceilings, and its facade is a dense tapestry of thousands of sculptures, each a masterpiece of carving and calculation. It is a frozen symphony in stone. The official story is that construction of this Leviathan began in 1211. And here's the astonishing part: we are told it was largely erected in just 80 years. Now pause and truly picture the year 1211. This was a world without electricity. There were no trucks, no cranes, no computer-aided design, no complex architectural modeling software. The primary power source was human muscle and draft animals. The tools were a hammer and a chisel. In this reality, the Dark Ages as they call it, could you, a modern engineer with all your technology, build something of this scale and precision in 80 years? Or even 200? The mere question feels absurd. We are asked to believe that the art of construction somehow achieved a level of perfection unmatched until centuries later, while every other aspect of life, medicine, sanitation, science, communication, remained primitive. This paradox is the first hairline fracture in the historical edifice. But the mystery of Reims is not an isolated incident. It is merely the tip of an iceberg, the first thread in a web that stretches across the globe and leads to patterns far stranger and far more inconvenient for professional historians. These colossal stone structures stand all over the world, silent and majestic, like irrefutable rebuttals to our modern arrogance. We, with our supposed technological superiority centuries ahead, look at them and cannot honestly answer the most fundamental question: how? How could a people living in an era defined by struggle and limited resources achieve such mathematical precision and engineering perfection? Look closely at the cathedrals. Every stone is fitted with flawless millimeter-level accuracy. Every vault is calculated to withstand immense lateral pressure for a millennium. This requires not just skill, but a profound scientific knowledge of geometry, physics, and material strength. These were disciplines that we are assured were in their infancy or non-existent at the time. Yet somehow, in a parallel reality, while people were supposedly living in cold, smoky huts, fighting with swords and writing with quill pens by candlelight, they were simultaneously erecting buildings whose sheer complexity challenged modern engineers using lasers and steel. And they did all of this in record time, often faster than many modern skyscrapers are completed today. Let's move past pure architectural admiration and ask some simple, practical questions about logistics. The construction of a cathedral is first and foremost a massive logistical challenge. Millions of tons of stone had to be quarried. Where were these quarries? How were the stone blocks shaped with such inhuman precision without automated machinery? But the truly crucial question is transportation. How were they moved? Without a vast network of paved roads, railways, or powerful motorized trucks, moving even a single multi-ton stone block becomes a monumental undertaking. And hundreds of thousands of them were required for just one building. The historical chronicles are deafeningly silent on these details. There are no detailed records of massive transport routes that would have needed infrastructure rivaling modern highway systems. There are no reliable accounts of the thousands upon thousands of workers, the construction crews, the quarrymen, the carvers, the supervisors, who needed to be fed, clothed, housed, and managed.
History expects us to believe that a civilization supposedly lacking basic efficient technologies could spontaneously create logistical chains rivaling the complexity and scale of modern multinational corporations. This paradox is too vast, too glaring to be ignored, and it repeats itself endlessly from cathedral to cathedral, from castle to castle, all across Europe and the rest of the world. History simply throws arbitrary dates at us, 1211, 1345, 1480, and we are expected to accept them on faith, filling in the massive gaps with our imagination. But what if these dates are just a cover? A convenient, fabricated timeline designed to fit inexplicable artifacts into a neat but false narrative. What if the Reims Cathedral and structures like it are not products of their time, but the surviving legacy of something infinitely greater? A civilization that existed long before our current timeline began. The thought is radical, perhaps even insane at first glance. But the deeper we delve into the details, the more inconsistencies we find. The official version cracks under the slightest pressure of basic logic. The mystery of the cathedrals is not just a question of construction technology, it is a question about the very nature of our history and the possibility of a forgotten, erased past. To truly understand this, we need to look at a highly suspicious pattern that accompanies the history of these ancient buildings. This pattern involves destruction and fire, and it repeats so obsessively that it can no longer be dismissed as mere coincidence. It is, perhaps, the key to understanding what really happened. After analyzing the chronicles of hundreds of these ancient stone structures, a deeply disturbing pattern emerges. For nearly every great stone cathedral, there is a pervasive legend that it was built on the site of an older, humbler, and crucially, wooden church that was suddenly destroyed in a devastating blaze. Reims Cathedral is no exception. We are told it was built on the ashes of its wooden predecessor, which conveniently burned down just a year before the new, massive stone construction supposedly began. This scenario is a universal template. Stone giants that can withstand the ages somehow constantly rise from the ashes of easily destroyed wooden buildings. Isn't that a little too neat? It feels less like history and more like a pre-written universal explanation, a narrative device inserted into historical accounts to fill a gaping, embarrassing void. Why would a massive stone building capable of surviving a millennium of warfare and weather need such a dramatic, fiery backstory? This fire narrative solves several problems for the official timeline. It explains why a massive, high-tech construction project suddenly and urgently began on that specific spot. More importantly, it creates an illusion of continuity, linking a technologically inexplicable masterpiece to an earlier, more primitive, and therefore more believable historical period. But from the standpoint of mathematical probability, such a number of random, yet perfectly timed, fateful fires immediately followed by a construction boom looks like an outright fabrication. The fire stories are a smokescreen. If the fire stories are just a facade, then who were the people we are told were the creators of these masterpieces? Official history names the architect of Reims Cathedral as Jean d'Orbay. But the moment we try to learn anything concrete about this man, we hit a solid brick wall of ambiguity. Who was he? Where did he get his knowledge, which was clearly centuries ahead of his supposed time? Where are his blueprints, his complex calculations, his architectural school, his students? None of it exists. His biography is a collection of vague assumptions and contradictory references to other projects. For instance, he is credited with participating in the construction of buildings that were supposedly founded back in the 6th century, and then 600 years later, he is starting the construction of other massive churches. This doesn't create the image of a real person, but of a mythical character, a phantom architect, whose name was simply retroactively written into history to provide authorship for an anonymous and uncredited masterpiece. A logical question arises: did Did he build it at all, or did he simply find it, and his name, as a figure from a later and more understandable era, was attached to the ancient structure to somehow integrate it into the new manufactured timeline? Such phantom architects, whose existence is supported by virtually no real evidence other than the buildings themselves, are found throughout official history. This is another massive crack in the foundation of the official version. So, a deeply disturbing picture emerges. Technologically inexplicable buildings, suspiciously frequent, convenient stories of fires serving as their backstory, and enigmatic architects whose biographies do not stand up to even basic scrutiny. All of this could be blamed on poor chronicles or lost documents, if not for one thing. All these details are just circumstantial evidence. The real, crushing, undeniable blow to the official story is not hidden in stone or ancient manuscripts. It is hidden in the numbers, in the very population data provided to us by the historians and demographers themselves. There is one area where you cannot lie, one system that cannot be faked in the past because it obeys strict, unforgiving laws. That is mathematics. Historians can invent any stories they want about fires and genius architects, but there is one thing you cannot argue with: arithmetic. And now, simple arithmetic is about to show us a truth that will leave you in complete shock. The time has come for the decisive experiment. We will set aside legends, assumptions, and convenient fictions and turn to the impartial, universally true language of numbers. Our method is simple, and it is based entirely on official, publicly available data. We will take population growth statistics from a period that is well documented, the last 200 to 250 years. Consider the United States, or England, or any major European nation. Since the early 19th century, the population has grown by factors of 5, 10, or even more. This is a colossal, historically recorded leap. We see similar dynamics across the globe. Now, using these established, recorded growth rates, we will perform a reverse calculation. We will not look into the future, but into the deep past. We will apply the very same mathematical model, the same rate of change, to see what the world's population should have been in those so-called dark ages. We will use their own numbers, their own mathematics, to check the integrity of their own history. This simple arithmetical step leads to results that can only be described as a demographic bombshell. They completely shatter the familiar picture of the world that has been painted for us since we were children. Let's begin our countdown. Applying the recorded, observed rate of population change, we see the numbers begin to shrink at a catastrophic rate. If we rewind time just 100 years from today, the world's population is no longer in the billions. That's just the start.
Moving further back into the manufactured history, we cross critical, unbelievable thresholds. By the year 1886, according to our simple linear calculation, the entire planet would have had only about 928 million people. By 1817, just over 200 years ago, that figure drops to 314 million. This is already several times less than what official sources casually tell us. By 1748, a mere 277 years ago, only 106 million people remain on the entire Earth. Imagine the population of modern-day Japan spread thinly across all continents. And now, let's take the truly massive step back to the time that historians use as their demarcation for the great empires and explorations, the year 1610. According to our mathematical model based on official growth rates, the world's population at that time would have been just 11.8 million people. That is fewer people than live in Moscow alone today. And this is during an era when we are told the great geographical discoveries were in full swing, massive empires were being built, and large-scale, highly organized wars were being fought across continents.
But the most devastating blow from our mathematics lands precisely on the era with which we began our investigation. We are approaching the 1200s, the very time when the foundations of the greatest Gothic cathedrals, including Rheims, were supposedly being laid with such feverish speed and scale. Continuing our calculations with the same relentless, unforgiving logic, we arrive at a truly shocking, unthinkable result. At the very moment when, according to official historians, thousands upon thousands of highly skilled people across Europe were enthusiastically building stone masterpieces that require the precision of a laser, the entire estimated population of planet Earth would have been about 18,700 people. Let me repeat that number so it sinks in. 18,700 people on the entire planet. That is the population of a small provincial town. It's the capacity of a minor league baseball stadium. It's fewer people than live in a single modern residential complex in any major city. And this is the moment when the official story collides head-on with mathematics and shatters into a million pieces. We are told that hundreds of architectural marvels were being erected around the world at this exact time. But who built them? If the entire planet had fewer people than attend a single football match today, who quarried and moved millions of tons of stone? Who developed the complex, high-level architectural plans? Who fed and organized these builders? Mathematics gives a clear, undeniable, and absolutely destructive answer. It is physically and demographically impossible. The historical version that claims a virtually non-existent global population was somehow more advanced in construction, logistics, and engineering than we are today collapses under the pressure of a simple arithmetic calculation. If the people of that time could not have physically built this, then the main and most important question arises, a question that changes everything. Who did? Mathematics has destroyed the alibi of official history. It has shown us that in the 13th century there was simply no one to build the cathedrals. This conclusion, however shocking, leaves us with only one logical alternative.
If these buildings were not built by the people of that time, then they were built by someone else, long before them. The answer, as radical as it may seem, is that we're dealing with the legacy of a previous, far more advanced global civilization. The people of the Middle Ages and subsequent eras did not build these masterpieces from scratch. They found them, they inhabited them, and perhaps they tried to repair them. Ancient daguerreotypes and photographs from the mid-19th century serve as silent, powerful witnesses to this version. In these images, we see the very same medieval cathedrals and ancient temples, but they do not look like new constructions. On the contrary, they are already standing there, ancient, majestic, and often half buried in soil, which speaks of a past cataclysm. Surrounding them is the primitive life of the 19th century, people in simple clothes, horse-drawn carts, unpaved streets. The contrast between the technological level of the people in the photos and the architectural perfection of the buildings is staggering. These are not photographs of construction. They are photographs of people slowly reclaiming ruins. We are looking at a world recovering from something global, something that wiped the slate clean, and these buildings are the silent artifacts of a bygone era, one that would later be called Tertiaria, or given another name. But if this is the legacy of a single, highly advanced civilization, it must have common features, a recognizable signature left by the real builders. And it does. All over the world, from Europe to Asia, we find the same complex symbols on the facades of these ancient buildings. One of the most striking examples is the griffin, a mythical creature that official history scatters across disparate, isolated cultures. Yet we see its depiction rendered in a nearly identical style on buildings separated by thousands of miles. This is not a random coincidence. This is an architectural language, a unified code that proves these structures had a single cultural source. These symbols are like a signature left by a civilization that was later erased from the history books.
We are told stories of desperate primitive peoples who supposedly arrived at similar architectural solutions and mythological figures independently. But the facts speak to the contrary. They speak to the existence of a single, cohesive, global culture that possessed technologies we still cannot fully replicate today. All these cathedrals, temples, and magnificent castles are links in the same vast chain, parts of a colossal global system that we are simply not meant to know about. Visual evidence, logistical absurdities, and recurring symbols all powerfully support our theory, but our most powerful and irrefutable tool is mathematics. It has already shown us that the global population in the 1200s was effectively zero, making any large-scale construction impossible. This conclusion alone overturns everything we thought we knew about the past. But if the math is right, it pushes us toward an even more frightening and fundamental conclusion. It points to a point of origin in the recent past, a moment when there were almost no humans on the planet. The thought is both fascinating and terrifying. It means that our current civilization is a very young phenomenon, perhaps only a few centuries old, and all history before a certain point is either a complete fabrication or a wildly misinterpreted chronicle of the previous world, the world of the true builders. We are on the verge of a discovery that could change absolutely everything. Our calculation for the 1200s exposed the absurdity of the official history. It was the stone that started an avalanche. But why stop there? If the mathematical model is correct, it should work as we go further, taking us deeper and deeper into the past. We've seen what it was like 800 years ago, but what about 1400 years ago? What lies hidden there in the depths of time where historians are afraid to look with a calculator in hand? Let's not be afraid. Let's take our mathematical experiment to its logical, however shocking, conclusion. Let's calculate what date this demographic countdown will lead us to and see what lies at that final, impossible point. The answer may be more incredible than any speculation. We have brought our mathematical experiment to a critical point, exposing the absurdity of the official history of the 1200s. But we will not stop. Now we will take the final step and gaze into the statistical abyss that this calculation opens before us. Continuing our countdown with the same relentless rate of population decline, we race back through the centuries. After the mark of 1000 AD, where there were only 18,700 people on Earth, the numbers begin to melt away faster and faster. The year 1000, 900, 800. With each step into the past, humanity becomes more and more ghostly, its presence on the planet approaching a statistical error. And then we reach the threshold of the 600s AD. Mathematics, based on the very demographic data that historians themselves provide as a baseline for growth, delivers its final, merciless verdict.
In the year 600 AD, the population of the entire planet Earth would have been precisely 3 people. This is not a metaphor or an exaggeration. It is the direct and inevitable result of a calculation based entirely on the historical rates of change that are publicly accepted. We have reached the end point, a mathematical zero, beyond which there is literally nothing. This figure, 3 people on the planet, presents us with a fundamental choice, a fork in the road, with 2 paths, each of which completely changes our understanding of the world. The first path is to take this calculation literally. This would mean that humanity as a species miraculously appeared sometime in the middle of the 7th century AD, and that all of history before that moment, from ancient Rome and Greece to the Egyptian pyramids, is an absolute fiction, a story invented wholesale. This option is so absurd that it can be dismissed immediately. But that leaves us with only the second path. If the math doesn't lie, but its result is an absurdity of this magnitude, then the initial premise itself must be catastrophically wrong. We have been assuming that human history is a continuous, smooth process of growth. But what if it's not? What if very recently, in the past, there was a sharp, absolute break in this timeline?
This calculation means one thing and one thing only. Very recently in our history, something colossal happened. A global event so devastating that it almost completely wiped out the planet's population and erased the collective memory of the past. Our mathematical model breaks down because it is trying to look beyond the event horizon of this cataclysm into the world that existed before it. This idea of a global cataclysm, a great reset, is the one master key that fits every single lock, opening all the doors of paradox we have been knocking on. If we assume that such an event occurred relatively recently, for example, sometime in the 18th century, perhaps around the symbolic date of 1776, then all the inexplicable paradoxes instantly fall into place. The incredible cathedrals and castles, they are not the crude constructions of the Dark Ages. They are the surviving heritage of a highly developed pre-cataclysmic civilization. The lost construction technologies, they weren't lost in antiquity. They disappeared along with the world of their creators during the reset event. The population mystery? The rapid, almost exponential population growth of the 19th and 20th centuries isn't a continuation of an ancient trend. It is a demographic explosion of the few survivors rebuilding their numbers from nearly zero. The official history? The entire chronicle that we know is a fabricated history written after the disaster, a chronicle designed to explain the new world and to incorporate the incomprehensible ruins of the past, labeling them as primitive medieval buildings and inventing vague legends and phantom builders for them. Therefore, all these magnificent cathedrals, castles, and palaces are not the legacy of primitive medieval people who mysteriously forgot how to build immediately after. They are the silent, towering witnesses of a world that came before us, a world that was deliberately hidden from us. They stand as irrefutable evidence that our civilization is not the first on this planet, and that our history is much shorter, much more tragic, and fundamentally different than we have ever been led to believe. The numbers and the facts are right in front of you. They were always here, just waiting for us to pay attention. This investigation is just beginning. If the very fabric of history is a lie, what else are they hiding in the shadows? If you want to learn more about the true builders of our world and the civilization that was erased from the record, hit that subscribe button. It's only going to get more interesting.